Today we'll discuss the JavaFX Summary. So JavaFX is now the preferred approach for developing Java programs that use graphics and GUIs. JavaFX uses a theater metaphor to present a scene on a stage. A GUI is made up of controls, events that represent user actions, and handlers that process those events. A single event handler can be used to process events generated by multiple controls. The HBox and VBox layout panes arrange their nodes in a single row or column. A group of radio buttons provide a set of mutually exclusive options. Color and date pickers are controls that allow the user to specify a color or calendar date. Moving the mouse and clicking the mouse button generate events to which a program can respond. Rubber banding is a graphical effect caused when a shape seems to resize as the mouse is dragged. Key events allow a program to respond immediately to the user pressing keyboard keys. A dialog box is a pop-up window that allows brief, specific user interaction. The look and feel of a file chooser is based on the underlying platform. Many values in JavaFX classes are managed as properties, which can be bound to other properties. Property bindings are used specifically to keep data values in sync. They are not a replacement for event handlers in general. A slider allows the user to specify a numeric value within a bounded range. A spinner lets the user select a value from a list of predefined options using arrow buttons. A tooltip provides a hint to the user about the purpose of a control. Controls should be disabled when their use is inappropriate. So now we'll discuss a summary of terms within JavaFX. So, action event. A JavaFX event that represents a general action such as a button push. Change listener. An object similar to an event handler that is set up to execute when a property value changes. Checkbox. A GUI control that can be toggled on or off using the mouse. Color picker. A GUI control that lets the user select a color. Control. A screen element that displays the information and/or allows the user to interact with the program. Date picker. A GUI control that lets the user select a calendar date. Dialog box. A window that pops up on top of any currently active window so that the user can interact with it. Disable. The act of setting the status of a GUI control so that it cannot be used. Event. Event. An object that represents an occurrence in which a program might respond. Event-driven program. So event-driven program. A program designed to respond to events when they occur. Event handler. An object that contains a method that is called when an event occurs. File chooser. A specialized dialog box that allows the user to select a file from the hard drive or other storage medium. Functional interface. An interface that contains a single abstract method. Graphical user interface, or GUI. An interface to a program that uses graphical elements such as windows, menus, text fields, and other controls. Interface. A Java structure that specifies a list of methods that the implementing class must define. Key event. An object that represents one of several events that occur when the user types keys on the keyboard. Lambda expression. A function that can be defined anonymously without being given an identifying name, and passed a parameter. Layout pane, a JavaFX node that governs how it. So I'll repeat that one. Layout pane, a JavaFX node that governs how the nodes it contains are presented visually. Method reference, a syntactic technique for specifying a method in an object of class. Mouse event, an object that represents one of several events that occur when the user uses the mouse or pressed a mouse button. Property, an object that holds a value that can be observed and monitored. Property binding, the act of binding one property to another so that when the value of one property changes, the other is also changed automatically. Radio button, a GUI control that is used with other radio buttons to provide a set of mutually exclusive options. Root node, a JavaFX node that is displayed in a scene that contains all the elements of the scene. Slider, a GUI control that allows the user to specify a numeric value from a list of predefined values arranged in a sequence. Text field, a GUI control that allows the user to enter one line of text. Tooltip, a short line of text that appears when the mouse pointer is paused momentarily over a control or other GUI element. So questions. What analogy does JavaFX use to represent high-level elements? Java uses a theater analogy to describe high-level GUI elements such as displaying a scene on a stage. What three elements are needed in a JavaFX GUI? A JavaFX GUI is made up of screen controls, events that those controls generate, and event handlers that respond to events when they occur. What does a scene display? A JavaFX scene displays a root node which serves as a container for all elements that make up the scene. What is the relationship between an event and an event handler? An event usually represents a user action. An event handler contains methods that are called when an event occurs. Describe the ways in which a JavaFX event handler can be specified. In the example codes, a JavaFX handler method is specified using a method reference, but that's just an alternate way to specify a lambda expression that could be used as an event handler method. Another way is to define an event handler. Another way to define an event handler is to define a full event handler class that implements the event handler interface. What type of event does a push button generate? A checkbox, a radio button. So what type of event does a push button, checkbox, or radio button generate? Push button, checkboxes, and radio buttons all generate action events, which represent the primary action on the control, like the button was pushed. Compare and contrast checkboxes and radio buttons. Both checkboxes and radio buttons show a toggled state, either on or off. However, radio buttons work as a group in which only one can be toggled on at any point in time. Checkboxes, on the other hand, represent independent options. When would you use a slider? A slider is useful when the user needs to specify a numeric value within specific bounds. Using a slider to get this input as opposed to a text field or some other control minimizes user error. What is the purpose of a layout pane? A layout pane is used to control the visual presentation of a set of GUI elements. There are several specific layout panes defined in the JavaFX API that displays elements in particular ways. What is a mouse event, and what is a key event? A mouse event is one of several events that occur when the user moves the mouse or pressed a mouse button. A key event occurs when the user types on a keyboard. What is a dialog box? A dialog box is a small window that appears for the purpose of conveying information, confirming an action, or accepting input. Generally, dialog boxes are used in specific situations for brief user interactions. What is the difference between a JavaFX property and a primitive value? A JavaFX property is an object that wraps a primitive value. A property is observable, meaning that it can be monitored by a change listener, which can take action when the value changes. What is the purpose of a tooltip? A tooltip is usually used to explain the purpose of a GUI control or other node by displaying a small amount of text when the mouse cursor is allowed to rest over the node. Also, it can be a hint to the user. When should a GUI control be disabled? GUI control should be disabled when their use is inappropriate. This helps guide the user to proper actions and minimize error handling and special cases. So this concludes the review and summary of JavaFX. Thanks.